They like us to have professional photos. And that was only like a month ago, and that was in Madison. So it's crazy how quickly the weather can change, right?
Well, I think we're ready. Hopefully we're ready to see you. I can see you. I can see your PowerPoint on the slide. So would you like us to advance the slide?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so you can go ahead and advance the slide if you'd like. Let me know if you're having problems hearing me. But yeah, so I'll just start by introducing myself too, and thanking you for inviting me to share my story and how I'm connected to organ donation. My name is Devyn Prielipp. I became a living donor when I was 21. So I'll jump right into kind of why and what my journey was leading me to my decision to donate. So I can't see anyone in the room or anyone who's listening, but give me a shout if you've ever heard of the village of Warrens, Wisconsin.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Right?
Cranfest, right?
Right.
Yes. So this is a very rough estimate on this map here on where the village of Warrens is located in our state. We are population unincorporated, but this is the place that I call home, where I was raised on my grandparents' cranberry marsh, and where my only neighbors were my uncle and cousins and my grandparents. So my childhood was really spent primarily outdoors, whether it was camping, riding four-wheeler or dirt bike, or just kind of playing in the mud with my younger brother. So it was an excellent way to grow up in quite a different scene from where I'm living now here in Madison. So you can go ahead. Oh, I have 3 messages. Great. You can go ahead and change the slide. So I would like to introduce to you this lovely lady. So at a young age, I learned the value of $1, what it means to work hard, love fearlessly, and not take life too seriously. And that is all thanks to this lady right here. This is my mom. She's pictured in the middle, and then there's a couple photos of me and my brother as well when we were younger. She was and is, to this day, the most inspiring, selfless human being I have ever met. And as a nurse at Choma Memorial Hospital in the OB department, she spent long days taking care of others, and then she would come home and take care of me and my brother. Whether it was, driving us to gymnastics or wrestling practice, finding fun or silly ways to surprise us, like concerts on our birthdays, or even small things like a new outfit waiting for us on our beds at home. And she just really, most importantly, made sure that we knew how much she loved us, and she found so many creative ways to do that. And to say that I was blessed is an understatement. It's really hard to sort of synopsize and articulate how special she was. You can go ahead and change the slide. So July 22nd, 2009. My mom tucked me in bed, and like any other night, and she promised me breakfast in bed for my birthday in the morning. And I was almost asleep when I heard a really loud knock on the front door. And that was really strange because we lived way out in the country on a marsh, and it was extremely unusual for anyone to be knocking on our door. But I heard my mom walk past my bedroom and down the stairs to see who it was. And then the next thing I heard was screaming. I launched out of my bed. I locked my bedroom door. I grabbed my cell phone and I called 911. I had no idea what was happening or who was in my house. And all I could hear was yelling and screaming. And then it didn't take me long to recognize that the voice that I was hearing was my stepfather. And so I was sitting in my room, scared and alone, and I could hear things being knocked over, more arguing, and then I heard gunshots. And I remember sitting in the ER, surrounded by our friends and family at the same hospital where my mom worked, and listening to the doctor say, "I'm so sorry, we did everything that we could." And in a matter of seconds, my life as I knew it was just flipped upside down, and it would never be the same. And I would be lying to you if I said the following days and months and even years have been easy. I spent a lot of time being angry and sad and frustrated and really feeling sorry for myself and my family. And they say that time heals all wounds, but that was really hard to believe at 15 years old. And after some time and healing, I really began to focus on the positives, because that is what my mom would have wanted. Positive number one, I had the best support system, very loving friends and family who helped me through that. I had my family, I was alive, and I was just raised to turn a negative into a positive, and so that's exactly what I did. You can go ahead and move on to the next slide. So I will never forget the first time I heard about living organ donation. I was sitting in my high school psychology class, and my teacher pulled up a story about a guy donating a kidney to his dad, and I was so fascinated by this because all I ever heard about was donating organs after you were passed. And so I had no idea that this was something that you could do while you were alive, and I became so interested in this. I spent many days after that researching what organs can you donate, what does this involve, and reading about other donor stories and experiences. I don't know if I can speak for everyone, but for me, hearing and reading about other donor stories is like really what I got the most out of when I was making my decision. And there are very few things in life that I have been 100% sure on, but I was 100% sure that living kidney donation was something I wanted to do for someone else. And to me, once I made that decision, it really became a matter of not if I'm going to donate, but when. And so at 17, I laugh about this now. I picked up the phone and called UW Health, and I said, "Hi, I would like to donate one of my kidneys." And it makes me laugh now because clearly I had no idea like what this process really involved. I just knew that I really wanted to do it. And not surprisingly, they let me know that I had to be at least 18. And even though I tried negotiating a permission slip type deal with them that I could have my dad sign, and they kind of just laughed and they appreciated my call and said to, reach back out when I'm of age. And so not long after my 18th birthday, I called back and I wanted to get that process started. And long story short, the team felt that I was just a little too young to make this kind of decision, and they asked me to wait a few years and make sure that this was something I wanted to do. And I did just that. My mind never wavered. And in spring of 2015, I called back and I said, "Hey, remember me? I still want to give you one of my kidneys." And so at that point, I was 20 years old, almost 21 years old. And anyone I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. Anyone who knows anything about living donation knows that the process to be approved for something like this is certainly not a short one. You know, months of very thorough physical, mental, psychological evaluation. So we have that going on. And then I also had to get my friends and family on board with my decision. And I would argue that was probably the hardest part about it. And understandably so. The most common question I got was why? Why would you put yourself at risk for a stranger? Why would you undergo a major surgery when you don't have to? Why not save your kidney for your future children? You know, that's very valid concerns. They're my friends and my family. They want what's best for me. And so really fielding those questions and sort of helping them understand the why. In the beginning, those questions were really hard for me to answer because I felt like I couldn't find the right words to articulate why in a way that they would fully understand. It took me a while to realize that I didn't really need them to understand, and I didn't really need them to accept my decision. But what I needed to do was I needed to be super vulnerable, involve them in the process, acknowledge that they had valid concerns, and sort of encourage that open dialogue with them. And my family knows, you know, once I have my mind made up on something, odds are I'm going to follow through with it no matter what. So just understanding that and following through, you know, that was tough, but in the end, and after some time, with the help of a very remarkable transplant team, I was able to get that call that I had been dreaming of for 3 years. We can switch to the next slide here. They called me and they said, "You are approved to donate." And so in August of 2015, at the age of 21, I became a non-directed living kidney donor. I don't remember a lot about waking up after surgery, including taking the selfie that I have pictured here. But I do remember Dr. Redfield, who was my surgeon, telling me that the surgery was a textbook success. And they my transplant team and my nurses and my surgeon kind of joked and called me the bionic donor because, you know, they're so used to operating on sick people. And from a surgical point of view, it was apparently much more difficult to sort of like get through like a healthy person's abdomen. And my surgeon joked and was like, "Well, I thought I was gonna have to get a chainsaw out to like get through your stomach muscles and your tissue." And I just laughed and I said, "I guess that's what 10 years of gymnastics will do to a person." So it was just an incredible experience. I was in the hospital for 3 nights and 4 days. And then they sent me home on the road to recovery. And luckily for me, my grandma, who is retired, was willing to take on the task of taking care of me for the following weeks. God bless her soul for that. But I remember sleeping in her living room chair because I literally couldn't get into bed. You know, I don't like to scare people away with this, but I also want to be super honest, and I was not prepared for the physical aftermath of having a surgery of that magnitude. You know, you think you're ready and you think you have an idea, but until it happens, you just don't really know. And so I remember even like taking trips to the bathroom and feeling like I ran a marathon. And so I would have to like take a nap after walking to the bathroom. So I remember also living off of her desserts until my regular appetite came back, which is funny. The healing process was not easy, but I mean, to me, a few weeks of discomfort allowed someone else to experience life in a way that they didn't even know was possible, in a way that they never could before. You can change the slide. So it's hard to read and it's a little blurry, but they warned me about the fact that it's pretty unlikely that I would ever hear anything from my recipient or ever know anything about them. And I was completely at peace with that, because that's not why I was donating. It didn't matter to me who the recipient was. But about 6 months after surgery, I was in the second semester of my senior year of college, and I got a voicemail from my transplant coordinator. And she said that I had received a letter from my recipient's family. And of course, I listened to this voicemail in the middle of one of the halls at school, and I started shaking, and I was like crying and excited. And I'm sure everyone walking by thought I was crazy or having some kind of meltdown. But I remember waiting for that letter to arrive at my house, and I've never been so diligent about checking the mail until I received that phone call. And I'll never forget the day I opened it, because it was from my recipient's mom. And she went on to describe how her young daughter was able to live this life in a way that she was never able to before. And she had these dreams of going to art school someday, and she included a picture that her daughter drew for me, and it said, "From the girl who got your gift of life." And so it's a picture of her and I, and just the most special day. And I felt so thankful and so incredibly lucky to have received such a letter from my recipient's family. So you can move to the next slide. So what I later discovered was that my recipient was a 15-year-old girl. And that was the same age I was when I lost my mom. And it was in that moment that I sort of found the words that I had been searching for to articulate the why. That question that I had such a hard time answering before. My mom brought life into this world every day as a nurse in the OB department. And my way of honoring her life was to give life to somebody else. And it's been 4 whole years since surgery, and I'm so proud and extremely fortunate to be able to sit here and share my story with all of you as a healthy 25-year-old, completely vulnerable, and advocating for a cause that I really believe so deeply in. So my last thought for you, and I'm happy to take questions if there is time for that, but I would like to leave you with one thought, and that is, instead of asking yourself and others the question why, try asking why not.
Devyn, this is Jill, and I want to thank you for sharing that amazing story. Boy, you have tears in my eyes a couple of times there, that's for sure. It's just an amazing story. I didn't know about you losing your mom, and I'm, again, so sorry to hear about that after all these years. But wow, what an amazing thing you turned that into. So I just wanted to comment on that. I don't know if anybody else has any questions or comments for Devyn.
Folks can just unmute themselves if they want to share anything or ask a question. So Devyn, what are you, this is Cindy, what are you kind of up to now, or what what you're working and.
Oh, yes. Yes, so I am certainly a busybody, which I've always been this way. So I graduated from UW La Crosse in 2017, and then I moved to Madison, where I currently live and work. I work for Exact Sciences. They are a clinical laboratory in the Madison area, and we do early detection screening for colon cancer. So it's an incredible job, and I've been here for almost a year now. So I have that going, and then I'm pretty involved in the community, as I am a current title holder in the pageant world. So I'm Miss Wisconsin for America 2019. And so kidney donation and domestic violence awareness are two causes that are very close to my heart and something that I advocate during my year of service. So I have that going as well until May. And then most recently, I've made my mind up that I will be starting grad school hopefully this January. I just am trying to figure out which university that I want to go through for that. So certainly keeping myself busy, and of course visiting the family as frequently as possible. Some people are curious sometimes about my brother and how he's doing too, and I just like to mention that he's doing well. He is a pilot, so he flies private jets for a living, and he absolutely loves it. So we both sort of strive to keep my mom proud, and the way we do that is keeping ourselves busy and doing good in this world that needs it. So that's kind of what I'm up to these days.
Well, thank you very much. Any other questions before we move on to our next speaker? Because I think tonight you're meeting some amazing, it happens to be women tonight. And Mary, are you ready to go? And
I am.
We'll pull up your PowerPoint if you give John just a second. But you're also in Madison tonight, is that correct?
I am.
And can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're going to talk about? Because some folks might know you because you're a very active volunteer and donation advocate.
Sure. Thank you, Cindy. Well, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I was diagnosed with kidney disease when I was 9 years old. And how it was actually detected is I was falling asleep at school, and people the teachers thought maybe I was bored, something was wrong. They didn't understand why I wasn't playing with other kids. So they called my parents, told them that they thought maybe I was bored in school, and my mom didn't believe that. She believed that maybe something was wrong because that wasn't like me, and I was also coming home and going to sleep on the couch instead of going and playing. So little did they know is that my mom was correct when she took me to the doctor, and I was diagnosed with a kidney disease, proliferative glomerulonephritis, and at that time. From that time on, I was very fortunate because my parents were told that I had 6 months to live because at that time they did not dialyze kids and they did not transplant kids. So I was really very fortunate that I was able to kind of hang on, and, I guess the best way is kind of struggle with my health from that time until the time I was 17 when I had my first transplant. And so I think for me, having the transplant when I was 17 was really a huge change for me. And at 17, my brother donated his kidney to me. He was actually 21 years old and made the decision when he walked into the dialysis center and saw that I was not doing well, and decided that it was something he wanted to do to kind of change my life and give me a better quality of life. So he donated that kidney, and unfortunately, I've had 4 transplants total, and I won't go into a ton of detail about it, but I did have my first one for my brother for 4 years. I had my second one for 4 years, and my third one for 11. And yay me, next month I hit 20 years with this transplant. So all successful, some bumps in the road, but I'm here healthy. And because I think of what I've gone through of being very young, when some of these things happened with my health, it really made me having these lifelong experiences, it's really made me look at my life and cherish my life and given me a strong interest to help improve healthcare. And so I have become a very strong advocate. About 6 years ago, I left the University of Wisconsin Hospital as an assistant director in the Carbone Cancer Center. And I left there and because I was actually having some problems with my knee after a surgery. So I took a leave. And I decided that what I wanted to do when I got better is really become a strong advocate and help others. So kind of tonight, one of the things I'm going to talk about is a campaign that I've been involved with. And I think, you know, some of the things that I have been involved with, I've been involved with the National Kidney Foundation, and I had to kind of look at that. So I was actually one of the youngest chapter chair people back when they had chair people at the age of 17 in Wisconsin, up by La Crosse. So I kind of feel proud to be able to say that. And so I have over 30 years of experience working with the National Kidney Foundation, and I continue to do that with being a peer mentor and also being on the advocacy committee and also being on the policy committee for the National Kidney Foundation. I've kind of done a lot of work around policy professionally as well, and so the option of and the opportunity to be able to get involved with Honor the Gift, I'll be talking a little bit about that and kind of why I got involved. So with that, let's go with the next. So Honor the Gift campaign is about having and transplant organizations really look to put forward the immunosuppressive bill for patients. And it's been really important now. One of the reasons I also got involved is being a transplant recipient, there is 36, usually the cap after transplant. If you have insurance, it works pretty well. Depending on your insurance and a variety of other issues, it can be very cumbersome. When I first got
Mary, this is Cindy. You're just breaking up a bit. I don't know if you're moving around or whatever.
Nope.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Speaker. I'll just take it off speaker. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yep. So I think one of the things that I found is when I was living in California, I did have health insurance, but I still had these pretty big copay payments. And with that, I feel very fortunate that I was actually able to use my credit cards that, when you get out of college, it seems like everybody and their brother wants to give you one. And thank goodness I did have them. And so at that point, I actually went into about $40,000 worth of debt with working and having health insurance. So that's really one of the reasons that I got involved in this campaign and why I've been working on policy for the immunosuppressive bill for kidney patients. Next slide. So some of the state's sponsors, you'll see Bill Cassidy, Dick Durbin, Ron Kind, and Michael Burgess are some of the folks that have been involved in drafting the legislation that is around the comprehensive immunosuppressive extension that would be for kidney patients. And I'm happy to say that Ron Kind out of La Crosse area, who I went to grade school, junior high, and high school with, and have stayed in touch with, is actually one of our co-leaders on that bill. So very excited to have that. Next slide, please. So with that, I think I think this has really been the time, I think, with Secretary Azar continuing and his support. His father also was a dialysis patient and also went on to have a kidney transplant. I think we have the opportunity. I think that there's a lot of understanding with having Secretary Azar being involved and understanding the whole process. On July 10th, the president signed the advanced order, and at that time I was actually at the signing of his executive order, which really was looking, and some of the questions that came during that time was really looking at the legislation around that. And one of the questions that was actually from another patient is, what are we going to do about the coverage for immunosuppressive medications? If we're going to increase transplant, we need to make sure that we're able to also help patients with their medications. So that was another great opportunity of bringing that forward. Next slide, please. So Honor the Gift campaign came out, and I actually became one of the advocates for the project. So they've been using this project to really bring awareness. And so really talking about how do we make sure that people aren't cutting dosages, or how do we make sure that people feel they can afford their medications. And so Honor the Gift campaign really came about to really be kind of a push to make sure that people understood about, you know, how there's a 3-year coverage and how we really want to increase that for patients. Next slide. So I think some of the information that we talk about is about talking through how Medicare covers, and then how could, you know, is this going to cost us a lot of money? So one of the things that they have seen is really, and that's why it has not been introduced yet, is really looking at how much money we can save by the taxpayers by having this immunosuppressive bill. And don't quote me on the number, but I think it was $300 million over the course of about 10 years. And so again, that's another way that we can actually save money by actually promoting this. So we will save money by extending this coverage. Next slide. So how do we, you know, one of the things that we've been doing with Honor the Gift campaign is we've been doing a lot on Facebook and on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and really just sharing our story. So, you know, everyone that has the story like myself, you know, how did we pay for those medications? How did, you know, I don't know what I would have done back then if I hadn't had credit cards. You know, I was able to do that, but not everybody had that opportunity, and people are still have some of these same issues. So again, Honor the Gift, you can make, we have a sign-on where you can go on and sign the pledge. So visit www.honorthegift.org, and you can sign the pledge. That's one way. Sharing your story, if you've got a story like mine, is letting people know and talking to your congressmen and women, talking to your senators, you know, getting them ready. I was out in DC during American Society of Nephrology meetings, and when I was out there on Capitol Hill, we talked about this bill coming and that they would be ready, hopefully, to sign on once it's there. So we're hoping that possibly by Thanksgiving, the bill may be dropping. And so we're hoping that we can get people to sign on and keep engaged with, you know, helping patients move forward and having a good life and not having to worry about how they're going to pay for those meds. So with that, I'll leave the last, I think, is, you know, everybody's story is important and everybody's story helps but talking to your congressmen and women to make sure that we get these important bills passed is going to be our greatest success, but also it is also our greatest challenge. So with that, if there's any questions, I can take those.
Mary, thanks so much for joining us tonight. So the call to action for living donors would be, I assume, to alert recipients that they are connected to, as well as advocating to others as they're out maybe talking to groups, et cetera, because it's not just kidney recipients you're looking to raise their voices. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's everyone. I mean, there's a lot of people that are talking about it, whether it's a living donor, whether it's a family member. These are important aspects of, having healthy lifestyles for these folks. And so it's not just hearing the kidney patients. It's hearing, Joe that works at Quick Trip, that they agree that these are things we should be helping people. We're going to save money in the long run. So it can be from everyone and anyone. And so it's not just, I think our stories like mine that I just shared, I think are important to hear how it impacted just one person. But there's many stories out there, and I've heard a lot of stories that are just really heartbreaking. And so telling those stories to the folks so that they understand and that they can, come around. And so as for living donors, my brother is a prime example of, he knew what it cost, for these medications. And, so where it's my mom or my dad or a cousin, it can be, like I said, it can be Joe at Quick Trip too. But, just being aware.
And Honor the Gift, Mary, is a collaborative effort between many kidney-related organizations. So it's not, I don't want to say it's its own entity. It's actually a collaborative effort of many kidney-related organizations. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. This actually really started from, I think, the thought was bringing it forward. A company called CareDX has been very instrumental in working to help people be able to, find their stories and tell their stories. But it's been a collaborative effort between the National Kidney Foundation as well as many other, and the association, the American Society of Nephrology, for instance. It's really a broad spectrum of, as I would say, is, having many organizations working together, for the common good.
Well, Mary, thank you for joining us tonight. And I think it just amplifies and moves very nicely into our next speaker, who's also a very active volunteer for the National Kidney Foundation, as well as many other organizations. Sarah, I'd like to turn it over to you if you're ready.
Thank you, Cindy. I hope everybody can hear me.
We're good. You're nice and clear, Sarah.
Great, thank you. So like Mary, I am also a kidney transplant recipient. I've only had one transplant, and mine was fairly recent. It was just 14 months ago. So the legislation that she's talking about that we hope to have introduced soon is extremely important to me. I'm still in that 36-month coordination period where Medicare is covering part of my medication costs, but that will end at a point in the not-too-distant future, and then I will face some increased out-of-pocket expense. So that's a very important bill. And if you want to go to the next slide. Mainly, I want to focus tonight on a bill that was already introduced in Congress. It's the Living Donor Protection Act. There are companion bills, one in the Senate, which is Senate Bill 511, and one in the House of Representatives, H.R. 1224. And these were both introduced February 14th of 2019 into the current Congress. These bills have been introduced before, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what happens if no action is taken on these bills in the next couple of years. But before we get into a lot of detail, I want to kind of piggyback on some of what Mary was saying with Health and Human Services Secretary Azar being very welcoming with and knowledgeable about transplant and kidney-related issues. And President Trump is certainly showing willingness to support the issues related to kidney disease and treatments. I think this is just a great opportunity to try to get this legislation passed and the legislation Mary was talking about as well. So hopefully we can get that done in the next year. So in the House, this bill is assigned to a number of different committees, and I honestly could start singing I'm Just a Bill from Schoolhouse Rock for those of you old enough to remember it, but I will spare you that torture. The bills, when they are introduced, they get assigned to committee, and there they can be debated and discussed, and they can languish there if that's what the case may be. And the reason I want to talk about where these committees are assigned is because we have Wisconsin representatives in these committees. So Education and Labor, Glenn Grothman is a member of that committee. We don't have anybody on the Energy and Commerce Committee in the House, but we do have Brian Stile from the 1st District as part of the Financial Services Committee. We don't have anybody in the House Administration Committee, but again, Glenn Grothman is also on Oversight and Reform. And so he's a very important contact for this bill because he sits on 2 of these committees that have this bill currently in front of them. And then the Senate bill is assigned to the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, and Tammy Baldwin is a member of this committee. The purpose of the bill is that it protects living donors from discrimination related to life insurance, disability insurance, or long-term care insurance, and that discrimination can take the form of either denying coverage or placing limits on coverage, possibly charging higher premiums, or even canceling coverage based solely on the applicant's status as a living organ donor. So for Devyn, for example, our earlier speaker who did such a great job of sharing her story of why she decided to be a living donor, that's an amazing gift that she and all of the living donors have given, and they should not have punishment as a result, or what I'm calling punishment, as a result of giving that gift. The other thing that this bill does is clarifies the Family Medical Leave Act to include living organ donation as a serious health condition that qualifies under FMLA. And the reason we mention that and the reason why it's important is that an employer could say to a potential living donor, look, this is not your serious health condition. You're a perfectly healthy person choosing to have an elective surgery, and that doesn't qualify under family medical leave. This bill would clarify that language in family medical leave and say, nope, living organ donors does qualify as a serious health condition. So if you would advance to the next slide, please. The current Congress, the 116th Congress, covers both of the years 2019 and 2020. So because we're approaching the end of calendar year 2019 does not mean that these bills have to be reintroduced. They're going to remain an active bill until the end of 2020. They remain in committee until they're either acted on or until that Congress ends, and if they are still in committee at that point, then they die. In the House, we have 3 co-sponsors of the bill. The more co-sponsors we can get, the better. Overall, throughout the country, there are 80 co-sponsors of the bill. 3 of those are our Democratic representatives here in Wisconsin. We would love to get some of the Republicans on board, and the best way to do that is to contact their offices and ask them to support this important legislation. Currently, the Senate bill isn't co-sponsored by either of our Wisconsin senators, so that is also an important act. We have 15 senators nationwide who have co-sponsored, and out of 100, that seems like a fairly large amount, but we would love to get more. And again, because Tammy Baldwin sits on the committee where the bill is under discussion, we would love to have her sign on as a co-sponsor. She has in the past, so I'm not sure what the hesitation is this year. She's a little busy. She's introducing a lot of other legislation right now. The committees need to release the bill to be put on the chamber calendar for vote, debate, or amendment, and that means that the committee is done with their discussion of it, and now the House or the Senate needs to vote. If both chambers, the House and the Senate, were to pass the bill, then if there are any differences between the bills resulting on those discussions, the conference committee resolves those, and then both chambers vote, and if passed, the president has 10 days to sign or veto the legislation. And I just want to emphasize again that with President Trump being very supportive of kidney-related issues at this point, this just seems like a really great opportunity to get this legislation passed. And if you want to go to the next slide. So what can you do to help? contact your representatives and senators about co-sponsoring this Living Donor Protection Act. And again, use those bill numbers. So whether you're calling their offices or dropping them a postcard or contacting them via social media, you want to reference that bill number, S511, and just call it the Living Donor Protection Act. November and December can be really good times to contact or connect with the local offices, because this coming week, neither chamber is in session in Washington because of Thanksgiving, so they likely are working out of their local offices for at least a few days. I mean, probably not on Thursday and maybe not even on Friday, but it would be a great time to contact the local offices. And then both sessions also adjourn in mid-December, so they have, I believe, 3 weeks total off, possibly 4, from the middle of December and then into January for that holiday break. So when they're in the local offices, it can be a little bit easier to connect with them, and you can write letters, you can email. If nothing else, follow them on social media, and then you'll be notified of town hall meetings or other meetings that they're holding locally, and feel free to attend those. There's always a time for question and answer at the end, and unfortunately most of them are during the workday, so if you work, that's not always an easy option. But if you go to those town hall meetings or local listening sessions, at the Q&A, raise your hand and say, I'd really like to ask for your support on the Living Donor Protection Act, and you only need to give them a couple of sentences, and at least you're being heard. And, the ask is, please co-sponsor this bill, if they haven't already. If they have, if it's one of the Democratic members of the House, then thank them for their sponsorship. And, again, don't hesitate to talk about it in front of a group of their constituents, because the more people that know about it, the better it is. And that's the takeaway, is ask for sponsorship via any of those methods. Follow them on social media. They all have Twitter accounts. They all have Facebook accounts. They all have Instagram. And you might be surprised that with Twitter, they actually do a lot of them manage their own accounts. They don't necessarily have staff members that are doing those. So you're actually, in many cases, reaching them directly. And I think that's my final. Oh, no, I do have one more slide. So we have some postcards that we created to make it easy for people to reach out to their legislators, and we asked them to tell a story about why they want support of this legislation. And these are a couple of the comments that were shared recently. One person said, my employer refuses both life and short-term and long-term disability insurance for employees who donate a kidney. And they actually said that the first question asked on the applications for those insurances is, have you ever donated a kidney? The first question. That's unconscionable, but what can we do? Right now it's legal. When another person said, when I was going through the process to donate, many expressed their reluctance to donate because of the potential future costs to them. So that's really important. Another person said, my sister donated a kidney to me. Taking the necessary time off for recovery was difficult. And then, a few other, it just makes sense to help people who are trying to help others, and the amount of wages lost. And in my own personal story, when I was looking for living donors, I had 2 people who had to drop out because they have very physical jobs and could not afford to take the 6 weeks off of work that the recovery would likely have required, and their employers were not able to adapt their work position to make it a less physical job for that time frame. So I had 2 people perfectly healthy, perfectly willing to donate, couldn't do it because of that. And the Living Donor Protection Act isn't going to solve all of those problems, but it certainly is going to solve some of them. And I would just really appreciate you contacting your representatives and asking for their support, especially if you live in District 6 with Glenn Grothman. But Brian Stile is an important contact. They all are important, but those that sit on the committees has a little bit of extra weight.
So Sarah, this is Cindy. I was kind of trying to figure out how I could be creative next Thursday when I'm hanging out with a lot of people who care about me. Could we write something? Could we start do you see what I mean? Could we write a little letter?
You really could. You could kind of do your own little mini petition within your family. And the best thing to do, especially if you all live in, fairly close by, But if you include your address, if you're within that representative's district and you include the addresses of everybody who's signing up, then they know that there's 10 or 15 or 20 constituents who all want support of that bill. So feel free to just have a piece of notebook paper that says, the people listed below want you to support the Living Donor Protection Act. List the bill number, get their names and addresses, and then mail that off to your representatives.
Could we make little homemade signs and take some selfies, at Thanksgiving and post those?
Absolutely. Any of those ideas are fantastic ideas. And again, if you're following those representatives, particularly on Twitter, or Instagram, and you post those pictures, include their handle as one of your hashtags, and it will definitely get their attention.
Well, Michelle Sherman, maybe that's a call out you could do on the Living Donors Together Facebook page. What do you think, Michelle?
Yes, absolutely. Can you hear me all right?
We can.
Wonderful. I was just sending a message here to Sarah in the group chat saying which is the best link to post on the Living Donors Together of Wisconsin Facebook page so that we can share that call to action and those creative ideas with our now 151 members.
Woohoo! Good job, you guys. Congratulations. Where did we start out, Jill and Michelle, when the year started? Do you remember?
We started the year just a little over 100 because this is year 2 for the group. So we have probably have about 45 to 50 new members this year.
Well, I think we should put a challenge out there for people to do something over the Thanksgiving. What do you guys think? I know you guys are creative.
Michelle, this is Sarah. I have a list of both senators and all of the representatives with their Facebook address, their Twitter handle, their Instagram, all of that. So I'll put that. It's in a Word document right now, and it needs a little bit of tweaking, but as soon as I get that formatted correctly, I'll send it to you, and you can probably somehow copy that onto the Facebook post.
Love it. Absolutely. And Cindy, I like the challenge for people to share their posts, not only in their personal groups, Living Donors Together of Wisconsin. So I think that'll be a nice way for us to rally the members and get them excited to support this bill and show us their faces and families this holiday season.
Well, Michelle, I don't know if you have some other things. We have one other thing before we go, but I know you wanted to maybe throw some things out to the group. I haven't checked the time, but anything else?
A few more minutes. If Devyn is still on the line, I did have a question that I posed in chat. I am a living kidney donor and donated to a non-relative. And there was always questions from people about donating to a non-relative. I'm a mother with 2 young children at the time. And people questioned my age. And when I donated, I was almost 40. And so I'm wondering what opinions and questions you get about your life-saving gift considering your age.
Yeah, so, man, I got so many questions. And it really goes back to that why, and is how I responded to that. And I will be super honest, and maybe you had a similar experience as far as people made some pretty nasty assumptions about why I was donating, and it went so far as someone saying, "Oh, you're doing this for attention." And that was like at the time, that was such a tough pill for me to swallow because I felt like I had all this stuff to prove, to explain, and like I was so focused on what other people thought about it. And I also made the choice to make it, bringing that to my friends and family, I kind of made it public in a way. So it just, when it really came down to it, all I could do was be honest and like speak from my heart. And at the end of the day, it's such a rare thing to do for anyone. And then it was rare for someone at 21. And so no matter what I responded with, people were going to make their own assumptions and judgments about it. So all I could do was be honest and tell them why. And it was in their hands to believe that information or my why or not. So at one point, I just had to stop worrying about what other people thought, and just be true to myself and why I did it. But I definitely concur in that people had a lot of opinions and made a lot of judgments on, why would you do that? So.
Thank you for sharing that perspective. And absolutely, I agree with you. And each of us have our own personal decisions. And
it was, I think, nearly a year ago, around December, that's when I found out that I needed a kidney. Going all the way up until that point, I just wasn't feeling well, so we didn't really know what was happening. Came to find out I needed to be on dialysis. Fortunately, you are able to live with one kidney, but since...
Sorry about that, Michelle.
I'm over here wondering what button I pushed on my own computer.
Well, it's amazing what technology helps us do or not do. We had a little surprise we wanted to show at the end to everybody, but we didn't want to cut you off, queuing it up.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Well, I was just sharing my thanks to Devyn for sharing that perspective, because as people are considering donating an organ, and we hear this as we're talking to people throughout the great state, whether we're volunteering at a National Kidney Foundation event, sharing our own story in our personal circles, advocating and rallying troops through the Living Donors Together Wisconsin efforts, we always we get that question a lot, like, what did others think of this? And we also get those questions. So hearing other people's perspective and how they handled it and those raw emotions and feelings in the moment are really helpful for others to process as they're considering this life-saving gift. So thank you for sharing that perspective and for being with us here this evening. These programs are so important for us to connect with each other and also be a resource for those that are considering. So whether folks join us in the moment from 6 to 7 o'clock on a Wednesday night once a quarter, or they check these out on the recording or on the Facebook Live, however people are accessing the information, we are so thankful for you and others that have joined us to share your stories throughout 2020 and through this series. And just think, a few months ago, we were connecting via email to say, boy, I'd like to get more involved. How can we do this? So thank you for those efforts of not only your continued advocacy and telling your story, but for your interest to get more involved and for reaching out to us. So my call to action here is for those that are listening and joining us this evening and in the future is, yes, let's get involved. The purpose of Living Donors Together Wisconsin was to gather and to advocate and to celebrate and to know who in our great state shared this life-saving gift. So that call to action is for us to connect, get involved, and on Thanksgiving, Cindy, we're going to put the call out to advocate and to share those messages on our social media.
Okay, Michelle, this time we'll try not to be like overlay to you, but if it's okay, I'd just like to share a little surprise on something else that we had the privilege of doing. The National Kidney Foundation was contacted by Marquette University to help share a message about living donation during one of the home opening games for the Marquette women's basketball team. And so we worked with one of our partners. As you know, we work with all of the transplant centers in the state of Wisconsin, and we had the privilege of working with Advocate Aurora to bring a specific message to the attendees at the Marquette University women's basketball home opener. So I think it would be a great way to end. This is about a 2-minute video, and John, I'll keep my fingers crossed.
It was, I think, nearly a year ago, around December. That's when I found out that I needed a kidney. Going all the way up until that point, I just wasn't feeling well, so we didn't really know what was happening. Came to find out I needed to be on dialysis. Fortunately, you are able to live with one kidney, but since both of my kidneys were scarred, I had to be on dialysis.
I have a disease called polycystic kidney disease, which is a progressive kidney disease. I was diagnosed with it when I was 30. Paired exchange is when somebody wants to donate and it's not a match.
I said, I'll be more than happy to donate if I'm a match. And at that time when I said that, I didn't realize that there was a pair donor program.
I ended up getting a kidney that was a great match for me, and Brian's kidney went to somebody else who needed a kidney that he was a great match for.
Right now, for me, since I'm so young, I have 3 to 5 years to get this kidney, although it seems like a long time, but I'm at the top of the list since I'm so young. Right now, it's just a waiting game.
If you can't find someone to direct match, the pair match program will shorten that significantly.
It's kind of hard because I can't play. It makes me a little bit depressed, you know, being around it a little bit, but I love it so much. I can't not be around it, you know, so I just want to help and be their biggest supporter.
7 years versus 9 months, right? That's the biggest thing about the paired exchange program, right? Is that how much it shortens the wait time.
If you're healthy and able to do it, that there really is nothing to be afraid of.
The pair exchange program is so important. It can impact so many lives, including mine. So if you're interested in learning more, contact St. Luke's. They can help you get started. Thank you.
We were proud to be ambassadors for Donate Life Wisconsin, and Carrie take the lead on contacting those 2 individuals you saw in the video. And it was a great opportunity. We were able to staff a table also at the game in terms of providing information about living kidney donation. So I thought it would be just a nice way to end tonight, Jill and Michelle. And I just want to thank both of you, as well as Sarah, who's been a liaison from our advocacy committee, Mary, Devyn, for joining us tonight, but for all the folks that have joined us throughout the year. But it's volunteers that can create change. And all of you have volunteered in one way or another, not just to do something like tonight, but you've done the greatest volunteerism, and that's to give life to another. So I just want to say, as the year closes, how grateful I am personally, and how I want to say thank you on behalf of the over 1,500 people that are waiting still for kidneys in the state of Wisconsin. Jill, Michelle, parting comments?
This is Jill. I just want to thank everybody for attending tonight, and for all of you who've maybe attended throughout the whole year and maybe even last year. And it's just been another great year, and hope to see many of you in the upcoming year of 2020.
Absolutely. I share those sentiments. Happy holidays and year end to everybody. Thank you for joining us through Living Donors Together of Wisconsin, and thanks to the National Kidney Foundation for being a fabulous partner and friend to all of us, and for all of the work that you do each and every day to advocate and protect. Really appreciate it. Take care, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.